the invocation, and it is like the foundational verse, you could say, for the whole book. The principle that the whole book is based on is there, that everything emanating from the Lord is perfect. The personality of Godhead is perfect and complete. And because he's completely perfect, all emanations from him, such as this phenomenal world, are perfectly equipped as complete wholeness. And so really the book, in one sense, at least it's a very important theme throughout the book, it is based on that. So we said that the invocation and mantra 1 and mantra 2, they're the first section, and they're explaining this point we just mentioned, how the Lord is perfect and complete, and everything coming from him is also. And then verse 1, Ishavasyam idam sarvam, is establishing the Ishavasya principle, that everything is owned and controlled by the Lord. He has arranged, he owns everything, he has made all arrangements for all the systems, life systems, and how everything goes on. And if we can just follow his plan, his program, then because he's perfect and complete, and all his arrangements are perfect and complete, so if we live according to his arrangements, our lives will be perfect and complete. In very simple terms, this is the message there. And then this is brought out very clearly in mantra 2, that if we accept this Ishavasya principle, everything's owned and controlled by the Lord, we should just take what we need, or even not exactly what we need, but what he has set aside as our quota, and not infringe on anyone else's quota. If we live like that in his devotional service, then mantra 2 said, one can aspire to live for hundreds of years. Then it doesn't really matter the material world or the spiritual world, or a nice situation, a not nice situation, doesn't really matter. Even heaven and hell. As, who was it said, I think Yamunacharya, Kaivalya Narakayate, Tridas Pur Akash Pushpayate. For a devotee, the idea of Kaivalya, impersonal liberation, is just like Narakayate. It's like hell. Devotee doesn't want it. And Tridas Pur, the higher stages in the 3 worlds, the heavenly planets, they're like Akash Pushpa. Pushpa, of course, means flowers, but Akash means the sky or space. Like flowers in the sky. Did you ever see flowers in the sky? Not often. Maybe, occasionally we do on Rath Yatra. We have some helicopter come and drop flowers or flower petals for Lord Jagannath. But otherwise, you don't see flowers in the sky. It's just hallucination. If you think you saw flowers in the sky, generally we would take it you're hallucinating. Yeah. So the devotee doesn't mind if the situation is materially good or bad, or even if it's in the material world or outside the material world. As long as the devotee is living according to the Ishavasya principle, just living for Krishna, living to please Krishna and serve Krishna, and for himself or herself, just live in a modest way, whatever the Lord provides, then the devotee is happy and can just go on and on and on. And the verse says, can live for hundreds of years. Actually, the devotee would feel, I can live like this forever. Mama Janmani Janmanishvare Bhavata Bhakti Ramaita. We mentioned last night, Lord Chaitanya says, I don't need money or fame or followers or a beautiful wife or anything material. I just don't need. What do I need? I just need unmotivated, causeless devotional service, birth after birth, and that's it. So that was the first section. It's like an introduction to the Ishavasya principle, you know, like the basic ideas of the Ishavasya principle. And then last night we read Mantra 3, which was talking about the people who do not follow the Ishavasya system, who don't recognize that everything's owned and controlled by Krishna, but they think everything is just there. It just happens to be there and is just available to whoever gets their hands on it, and in this way enjoy. So what happens to them? Well, Hare Krishna. They may think they're having a good time. Eat, drink, and be married. No, be merry. You might be married and be married too. You also might be married and not be married. And you also might not be married and not be married too. So anyway, whatever. But these people who just ignore their spiritual natures and ignore Krishna and just ignore who they really are and do things which are opposed to their real natures and opposed to their happiness, he refers to them here as Atma Hana, killers of the soul. You know, if someone gets shot or something by some criminals or in a war, then we think, oh, that's a great shame. But if someone shoots themselves, that's really a great shame. You know, someone takes a hammer and for no good reason just starts going whack, whack. Then you think, wow, that's a real shame. I mean, even we're talking about people who are not necessarily suicidal. If someone, it's one thing to be suicidal, it's another thing for someone who is not suicidal to just kill themselves. I read many years ago about an artist. He wanted to do what he thought would be the ultimate piece of art. That was a video of him killing himself as for art's sake. So he did it. And he actually cut off different pieces until he just died. And he videoed the whole thing. And he told all his friends and people, and you know, he was doing it for art. The killer of the soul. It's crazy, isn't it? I mean, it really is crazy. So actually material life means that. That's what it means. We're just doing so many things to kill ourselves. We're doing so many things to make ourselves suffer. And that's what material life is. So, people who live like that and they think that it's the way to live and this is how to become happy, they're very unfortunate. So those people, the killers of the soul, then they enter into their planets known as the worlds of the faithless, full of darkness and ignorance. So now we go into section 3. Have a look at the beginning of your overview books. Hopefully you have one. I don't know if they brought more or what they said they would, but anyway, if you don't have, look over someone's shoulder. An overview of the sections of Sri Isopanisad. So we're going to go on now to section 3. I'll just read what it says there. Mantras 4 to 8. The Supreme Lord is the greatest person and possesses unique characteristics. Within him all contradictions are resolved. The pure devotees see everything and everyone in relation to him and are therefore completely free from anxiety on the transcendental platform. By rendering devotional service in this consciousness, they realize him directly. Now, in your overview books, there is a more detailed discussion of this section, I think. Is it there? Section 3, mantras 4 to 8. There's an explanation, a brief explanation of each mantra. Is it there? I hope so. So now basically this section then, first of all, in mantras 4 and 5, the speaker, and actually we could mention at this stage, who is the speaker? In Bhagavad Gita we know who the speaker is. Sometimes it's Krishna, sometimes it's Arjuna. Dhritarashtra speaks a verse and Sanjay says something. And it says, Arjuna Uvacha Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, we know who's speaking. Same in the Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, but here it doesn't exactly say. But we know, because this is part of the Yajur Veda, as we read last night. It was in the purport of what? Was it mantra 1? Anyway, we read it last night. It's part of the Yajur Veda. This is being spoken by the personified Vedas. The personified Vedas who appear in Srimad Bhagavatam in the 10th canto, is it chapter 87, 88 or something like that? I forget exactly. But there's a chapter there right at the end, close to the end of the 10th canto, prayers by the personified Vedas. And they're beautiful prayers to Krishna. These verses, all these verses, this book, is spoken by the same personified Vedas. Now, did I just see someone walk in with a box? What was in the box? I cannot. The books. Isopanisad books, or the overview books, or both? Both? Maybe we should just take a break for a minute. If anybody wants to get a book or a copy of the study guide, please go see the ladies back there, Shamli, Shori, and you can get, and then you'll be able to follow along easily. quickly get your books and overview books. Verdant, bye. Is that you? Kenjo? I haven't seen you for years. Where's your father? Lost. Yeah, I haven't seen him for, I don't know how many years, 10? So, while everyone's getting their books and overview books, let me just continue. So yeah, this section, mantras 4 to 8. Mantra 4 and mantra 5 are talking further about the Lord, the nature of the Lord, a little more detail. We heard in the invocation, particularly the invocation, we heard something about the nature of the Lord. He's perfect and complete. And therefore all emanations from him are also perfect and complete. So yes, that's something about the Lord. But of course there's a lot more about the Lord than just that. So we'll read mantras 4 and 5 in a minute, and we'll see there describing in a little more detail the nature of the Lord. And they're particularly describing certain features of his nature which are really extraordinary. In one sense, any part of the nature of the Lord is really extraordinary, but some parts are even more really extraordinary. So in 4 and 5, the personified Vedas are mentioning some apparently contradictory characteristics of the Lord. And then 6, 7, and 8 are describing again the devotees and how they understand these things about the Lord, how they understand these things. And particularly the idea is, anyway, we'll get there shortly, but basically the idea is the very advanced devotees, the Uttama Adhikaris, they understand the Lord through experiencing him directly. They've met him face to face. They know him personally, just as we know each other personally. So the Uttama Adhikaris, they also know the Lord by seeing him directly. Whereas the Madhyam Adhikaris, and also the Kanishta Adhikaris, but they really need to come up to being Madhyam Adhikaris. So particularly the Madhyam Adhikaris, they can understand the Lord through being instructed, through getting good instruction, and seeing in terms of the instructions. Okay, so let's go on here. Let's have a look in our overview books. Let us put them to use. So up the top of this page then, section 3, mantras 4 to 8, is the paragraph we just read from the overview of the sections. So that top paragraph is just straight out of the overview of the sections. And then mantra 4, and let's just read the first paragraph here. Mantra 4, Lord Krishna possesses the most glorious characteristics, completely distinguishing him from all other persons. Sometimes these qualities may seem contradictory, but with him, Within him all contradictions are resolved. He is fixed in one place, but he is the swiftest. He is localized, but controls all parts of the creation. And then mantra 5 is continuing the same theme, essentially. I'll just read the first paragraph there. Srila Prabhupada explains in the first paragraph of the purport of mantra 5, the contradictions given here prove the inconceivable potencies of the Lord. He walks, and he does not walk. Ordinarily, if someone can walk, it is illogical to say he cannot walk. But in reference to God, such a contradiction simply serves to indicate his inconceivable power. Okay, I'm going to read. I'll just read the Sanskrit here now, and I'll read the translations of these two verses. We'll kind of look at them together. Anechareka manasojaviyo naina deva apnavan purvam arshat tadavaton yanatyeti tishtat tasminapo matarishvatadati. Although fixed in his abode, the personality of Godhead is swifter than the mind and can overcome all others running. You say, Mr. Bolt from, where's he from? Jamaica? Oh, he's slow like a snail. Oh, yeah. The powerful demigods, what to speak of Mr. Bolt, cannot approach him. Although in one place, he controls those who supply the air and the rain. In other words, even though he's in one place, he's everywhere, because the air is everywhere and rain is everywhere. He surpasses all in excellence. And let's just read mantra 5, because it's really the same theme continuing. Tad ajati, tad naijati, tad dure, tad vantike, tad antarasya sarvasya, tad u sarvasyasya bhayata. The Supreme Lord walks and does not walk. He is far away, but he's very near as well. He's within everything, and yet he is outside of everything. So let's just go back to the purport of mantra 4. We'll just touch on a few points, because we have to move on a bit. We'll just touch on a few points. Yes, so page 34, right at the very beginning of the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, through mental speculation, even the greatest philosopher cannot know the Supreme Lord, who is the absolute personality of Godhead. He can be known only by his devotees through his mercy. In Brahma Samhita 534 it's stated that even if a non-devotee philosopher travels through space at the speed of the wind or the mind for hundreds of millions of years, he will still find that the absolute truth is far, far away from him. So if you're familiar with Brahma Samhita, you'd be familiar with that verse. Even if one travels at the speed of the mind, and Prabhupada explains what that means. Speed of the mind means that here we are sitting in Phoenix, and now I am thinking of Radha Radhanath in Chatsworth. I'm thinking of them right now, in my mind. That's the speed of the mind. I went from here to Chatsworth in a second. And not just to Chatsworth. Now I'm thinking of Govardhan Hill. Wow. I just went to go downhill in 1 second. And, you know, now I'm thinking of our temple in New York, in Brooklyn, Radha Govinda. That's really a long way away. That's the speed of the mind. You can go from here to some place long way away in 1 second, in a fraction of a second, on the spot. That's the speed of the mind. So that verse from Brahma Samhita 5:34 is saying that even if you travel at that speed for hundreds of millions of years, heading, you think, in the direction of Goloka Vrindavan, here I come, speed of the mind. But even, as Prabhupada says here, even after hundreds of millions of years, you will find, not only will you find that you have not reached your destination, Goloka Vrindavan, you will find you have not got any closer to it than before you started. So you see, it's just the wrong program. It's the wrong dimension. The whole thing works differently, very differently. And that may not be a very good example, but an example which Sadaputta Prabhu gave is that if you've got a big building, a big skyscraper, many floors, the building, it has an address. It may be number 10 such and such street. And the person you're visiting, they may have their office on the 20th floor at number 10, whatever street it is. Just say West Street. So you may just have that address, 10 West Street. In other words, you're working on a two-dimensional level, just width and length, not height. So you go to 10 West Street and you look, okay, now where is this office number such and such? But because you haven't got access to the other dimension of height, you won't find it. And you'll think, you know, what's wrong? We've got the wrong information, but you've got the right information. But you need access to the other dimension. Anyway, it's just, you know, a type of example, which perhaps gives a little idea. So Krishna is not reached in that way by some material means. He's in another dimension. And Prabhupada says here that he can be known only by his devotees through his mercy. So when a person becomes his devotee and gets his mercy, then the devotee does not have to move 6 inches. The devotee doesn't have to move anywhere. Krishna will be there. He'll be with Krishna. Krishna will be with him. And as described in, it's either the 3rd or 4th chapter of the Adi Leela of Chaitanya Charitamrita, that Gokula, Goloka, Gokula, the spiritual world is all-pervading. It extends both upwards and downwards. It's all-pervading. So if one becomes Krishna conscious enough, one will find one is in Krishna's pastimes, with Krishna, herding the cows, etc., while sitting in the hall in New Jagannathpuri. How's that? Or even just sitting at home. Just sitting at home, you'll see you're with Krishna in the spiritual world, because it's all pervading. So it's not a matter of traveling some distance. It's not a matter of developing the intellect, you know, like going to school and gradually you develop your intellect. In the beginning, you're taught 1 + 1 = what, and you have to think about it, you know, in the beginning. But after some time, you can figure out some complex equation as your intellect develops. But understanding Krishna, knowing Krishna, doesn't work in that way. If we become his devotees, and the more we become his devotees, the more he gives his mercy, and the more we realize him, until one day we'll meet him face to face. This is what happened to Lord Brahma. It's described in the Bhagavatam that he became fully Krishna conscious, and he turned around and there was Krishna. And Krishna walked up to him and shook his hand. This is what the Bhagavatam says. And congratulated him. You've perfected your love. So this is how it works. We have to tune in. Krishna's here in this room with us, dancing, playing the flute. He's right here. And if we progress in devotional service sufficiently by his mercy, we'll see him and meet him and speak to him, and he'll speak with us. Yeah. So Krishna's here. What is required is that we tune in. And you may know we've told the little story a few times. Tuning in. In the Great Depression in America, everybody went bankrupt. And there were just a few businesses still running, like essential businesses somehow running. And so many people unemployed, just like the majority. And to get a job was almost impossible. And if there was ever a job available, hundreds of people would come to apply for one job, even if they didn't know how to do whatever the job was, but they were so desperate. And we mentioned sometimes what happened when we were building the temple in Chatsworth. We would occasionally need casual labor. So we went to the labor office somewhere, I don't know where, somewhere down the road. And there's all these people there looking for a job. And so the devotees would go down, and you know, there's maybe 50 people there looking for a job. And the devotee announces, anyone here know carpentry? 50 hands go up. Anyone here know plumbing? 50 hands go up. After a while he understood, you know, this is not real. So what he did a very interesting thing. He said, anyone here know brain surgery? 50 hands went up. So when people get desperate, sure, they'll try anything. As we said yesterday, they won't just say, oh, too bad, I'll lie down and die. They fight to stay alive. So anyway, during the Depression in America, this is the situation. And one time, Western Union, at that time they were like a communications telegraph company. And they used to send telegraphs by Morse code. You know how Morse code works? Different, like taps, indicate different letters. 3 short taps means S, stands for S. 3 long taps means O. Yeah. So anyway, and each letter has, is indicated by a certain number of taps at a certain speed. So they needed a Morse code operator, and they're not so common. So they had to advertise, and 500 people came. And they all queued up, and one by one they were going in to see the boss to be interviewed. And in the building there was construction going on. So saws and hammers and banging and all that. And suddenly, one young boy, one young man who was at the end of the line came running up, past everyone, and went straight into the boss's office. And all the people in the line thought, wow, that's terrible, jumping the queue. How dare he do that? He meant to queue up. And a couple of minutes later, the boss came out with the young man and told everyone else, you can go home. I've given this young man the job. They were going to kill the young man. And then the boss explained, the thing is this, we need someone who knows Morse code. And he knows it. And he said, you hear all these construction sounds? The men hammering. And whatever. What they're hammering in Morse code. And what it means is, if you understand this, just come straight to my office immediately. I'll give you the job right away. So they were all there, and the message was there all around them, but because they weren't tuned in, they didn't get it. So we have to tune in. Krishna's here. We have to tune in. That's all. We have to tune in. And this is done by rendering devotional service. Then he gives his mercy, and then we can see him and speak with him like that. Yeah. So basically, in simple terms at least, that is what is explained in these verses. Now, of course, each verse has a long purport. We could go into great detail, but I don't think we really have sufficient time to go into great detail. But it is a fact that, this is really like the main point here. Let me just have a quick look. Yes, this is the main point. We need the mercy of the Lord. And then when you get the mercy of the Lord, then things which are materially inconceivable, they become easy to understand. You know the story of Narada Muni and the Brahmin and the cobbler? You know that story? Yes? That story applies. When we don't have much time, that's what we say. There was a comedy club. There was a comedy club. And in order to make things go quicker, all the members of the club knew all the jokes. They would just call out, "Number 64! That's a joke. Joke number 64. And everyone would roar with laughter. Number 80. Oh, everyone would roar with laughter. And one visitor asked one of them, why did you laugh so much? And the man who had been laughing at, said, number 22, and he roared with laughter. He said, oh, he told it so nicely. So the Narada Muni and the cobbler and the Brahmin, Narada Muni was going to visit the Lord in Vaikuntha. He stopped on the way at the house of one puffed up, just arrogant, proud Brahmin. And the Brahmin said, oh, I heard you're going to see the Lord in Vaikuntha. And, when you see him, can you please ask him when I'm going back to Godhead? I know it'll be soon because I'm so qualified, but I'd like to know, will it be this week or next week, because I want to finish up a few things before I go. Yeah. So Narada said, okay. And then he met one cobbler who was a devotee and was just chanting and chanting very happily, but very humble fellow. And he also asked Narada, if you're going to see the Lord, please ask him, will I ever come to him? So Narada asked the Lord, and the Lord said, that Brahmin is so puffed up and he's just too much. In fact, he's so much too much that even though I'm God, even I don't know when he's coming back to Godhead. But that cobbler, he's such a nice devotee. He's going to come back at the end of this lifetime. So Narada went back and told the cobbler, look, the Brahmin, I'm so sorry, what the Lord told me. Oh, and the Lord told Narada, if you want to know why I've said this, when you meet them, tell them that when you met me, I was busy threading an elephant through the eye of a needle, and see how they react. And then you'll understand why I've said this. So Narada told the Brahmin, the Lord apologizes, but he says he doesn't really know when you're going back to Godhead, but it's going to be after a pretty long time. And the Brahmin got so angry. Oh, you're a rascal. I don't think you even went to see the Lord because I'm so qualified. And the Lord would never say that about me. And Narada said, oh, by the way, the Lord was threading an elephant through the eye of a needle when I saw him. And the Brahmin said, what? That's crazy. An elephant through the eye of a needle, that's ridiculous. Get out. Then Narada went to see the cobbler, humble devotee sitting and chanting. And Narada told him, the Lord says you'll come back to him at the end of this life. And the cobbler was so happy. And Narada said, but one thing, do you know? When I was with the Lord, he was threading an elephant through the eye of a needle. What do you think of that? And the cobbler became even happier. Oh, my Lord is so wonderful. And an elephant through the eye of a needle, that's great. And he started dancing even more. And Narada said, you believe that? And the cobbler said, sure. He was sitting under a banyan tree. He picked up a banyan seed pod, it's sort of like a nut or something like that, and opened it up, and inside were many seeds, 100 seeds or more. And he said each one of these little seeds is potentially a great banyan tree like this, bigger bigger than a number of elephants. And he's put all of these, hundreds of these trees, you could say, inside this little nut. To put an elephant through the eye of a needle, that's nothing. So the thing is, because of his devotion, he understood. Krishna gave him the intelligence. So all these things, he walks and doesn't walk, as Prabhupada says. Either you can walk or you can't walk. You can't be both. You can't walk and not be able to walk at the same time. But with the Lord, all these apparent contradictions they're resolved and reconciled. He's very far away in Goloka Vrindavan. Like we said, even you travel for years and years, he's so far away you won't get any closer. But he's so close, he's within your heart. That's not even close. That's in you. It's not even close. So, like this. And he walks and he doesn't walk. Of course, Krishna, when he was here, he was walking every day, herding the cows. As the deity, it's the same Krishna. But generally, the deity doesn't walk. Of course, you do get some accounts of such things happening, but of course, they're extremely rare. They're very rare. So in that sense, you could say the deity doesn't walk. But it's the same Krishna, but he doesn't walk. But he walks. So like this, these apparent contradictions are resolved. Let us go on to mantras 6, 7, and 8. And we will adopt, I think, the same approach. Keep it fairly brief. I'll just read through mantras 6, 7, and 8. 4 and 5 we just read. They're about the Lord, how amazing the Lord is, and developing, increasing our understanding and appreciation of the Lord and his completeness and perfectness. 6, 7, and 8 are talking about the devotees more, in more detail. So mantra 6, Yastu sarvani bhutani atmanyeva anupashyati sarva bhuteshu chatmanam tato na vijugupsate. He who sees everything in relation to the Supreme Lord, who sees all living entities as his parts and parcels, and who sees the Supreme Lord within everything, never hates anything or any being. Let's read mantra 7, page 49 in my book, same in your book. So mantra 7, Yasmin sarvani bhutani atmai vabud vijanata tatrako moha ka shoka ekatvam anupashyata. One who always sees all living entities as spiritual sparks, in quality one with the Lord, becomes a true knower of things. What then can be illusion or anxiety for him? And let's read mantra 8. Continuing the same theme. Saparyagach chukra makayam avranam asnaviram shuddhava papa vidham kavir manishi paribu swayambor yatatat yatoratan vyadadach chastvatibhya samabhya. Such a person must factually know the greatest of all, the personality of Godhead, who is unembodied, omniscient, beyond reproach, without veins, pure and uncontaminated. The self-sufficient philosopher who has been fulfilling everyone's desire since time immemorial. So again, briefly, Mantra 6 is mainly describing the Mahabhagavat, perfect devotee, God-realized person. And actually Prabhupada says that right at the beginning of the purport, you see there at the bottom of page 43. This is a description of the Mahabhagavat, the great personality who sees everything in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the point here really is, again in very simple terms, is that he sees the Supreme Lord. He sees the Supreme Lord. Yeah. And the living entities. And everything. He sees everything in relation to the Lord. But he also sees the Supreme Lord. In Mantra 7, there's a slight difference. Here, one who always sees all living entities as spiritual sparks. So there's some seeing going on in quality one with the Lord. So such a person becomes a true knower of things. This is talking more about the Madhyam Adhikaris and the Kanishta Adhikaris who, if they're sincere, can become Madhyam Adhikaris. Because in Mantra 6, that devotee, the Mahabhagavat, he's just seeing all these things, including God himself. Pashyati means he sees, directly seeing. Here now, this person, some vision is there, but the idea is he becomes a true knower. In other words, he's not on the same level. If he practices nicely, he can become a true knower and understand things. Understand the Lord, understand this world, understand the living entities. So I hope that's sort of clear enough. Yeah. And how does he know? It is, well, you'll see how Prabhupada is translated there in the word for word. Anupashyataha, one who sees through authority. So the Madhyamadhikaris, those who are not perfect, but they're very serious about their Krishna consciousness, and they hear nicely scripture, they hear nicely from the spiritual master, they read the books, they really are making an effort like that, then gradually they can become true knowers. And on the basis of that, then the verse says, what then can be illusion or anxiety for them? Because they are knowers, and because they're becoming true knowers of all these very high transcendental facts, then they become free from illusion, they become free from anxiety. Whereas the Mahabhagavats, the pure devotees, they are just in another realm with Krishna, seeing Krishna, and it's like that. So, again, very simple presentation, very simple presentation. And then mantra 8 is again describing the devotees, and it's describing how they know the Lord. Well, actually, just for the sake of it, let me tell you one story, which some of you I'm sure have heard. Talking about, the difference between devotees who are seeing the Lord and devotees who are just in the process. They're developing their Krishna consciousness and developing their understanding, and in that way developing a type of philosophical vision, you could say. Actually, we call it Shastra Chaksus. Shastra, of course, means scripture. Chaksus means eyes. Seeing through the eyes of scripture. In other words, you look at a person, we look at Rasaraj Prabhu, and we don't just think, here's, some gentleman, but we look and we see, a spirit soul, devotee of the Lord, spiritual personality. So we don't actually see the spirit soul as such, but because we've heard, then when we see him, we consider him in those terms. This is the vision or the perspective of the Madhyamadikaris, the aspiring devotees. But then the very elevated devotees, they'll actually look at Rasaraj and they'll see, there's the spirit soul. And not only will they see the spirit soul, they'll see, there's Krishna. Hello, Krishna. Really? They'll actually see. So anyway, a little story to illustrate the idea. There was a great devotee named Vamsidas Babaji. He was living at the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and also the time of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta to some degree. So, and he was like a total avadhuta. He was just sort of lost in a world with Krishna, and he would just lose touch with the external world on a really regular basis. So there was one incident. One devotee came to visit him, and they're sitting there and just talking some Krishna consciousness. And Vamsidas had deities, Gaurnitai and some other deities also. Suddenly, in the middle of the conversation, Vamsidas Babaji just like turned to the deities like, what happened? He just stopped talking, looked at the deity, and he said to the other devotee, "Did you hear what Gauranga just said?" Of course, the other devotee did not hear anything at all. And the devotee said, "No, I didn't hear." And Vamsidas Babaji said, "Gauranga told me." He said, "Listen, Vamsidas, you're getting too old to go out and beg food. I will go out and beg food for you." That's what Gauranga told me. And Vamsidas sat there then looking very thoughtful, looking down. And he said to the other devotee, "Gauranga wants to serve me." Looking down, suddenly he jumped to his feet, picked up a stick, and pointed to the deity of Gauranga and said, "You try to serve me, I'll break your leg." So this is, otherworldly. Yeah. Okay, anyway, now we are looking at mantra 8. Let me just have a look at my notes here. Mantra 8. So, the thing is, this can be applied. This can be applied to the pure devotees, the Mahabhagavats, in terms of their realization. They actually know the Lord, like personally, in all these different ways. It can also be applied to the Madhyamadikaris who know the Lord because they've heard from authority. So the Lord is, he's described here in 6 ways. No material body, omniscient, not subject to criticism, no veins, pure and uncontaminated, and the self-sufficient knower who fulfills everyone's desires. So this is basically, again in very simple terms, showing us how different the Lord is from us, how different his body is from ours. We have veins and so on and so forth. Krishna's transcendental body is Satchit Ananda. And even like we mentioned, the deity generally doesn't walk, but the deity sometimes does walk. He sometimes does all sorts of things, actually. At the Phoenix Rath Yatra, what did we see? We saw the drama of Sakshi Gopal. The deity walked a good few hundred kilometers. It's like probably more than 1,000 kilometers he walked. Yeah. So the deity can do things and sometimes does, even though generally doesn't. So yeah, like this. Fulfills our desires, whatever you want. Ramanuja Prabhu, our Ramanuja from Radharani, he had a little conversation with Prabhupada once, I think here in South Africa. And he was asking Prabhupada, Krishna goes with us, like in our next life, Krishna goes with us. And he doesn't mind what sort of body we're getting. He just goes with us. Whatever sort of body or situation we're going into in our next life, Krishna just goes with us. Prabhupada was saying yes. And then Prabhupada said, yeah, if you have acted sinfully, then you have to go to the hellish planets. And Krishna takes your hand and Krishna says, come on, let's go. If we have acted sinfully, means we've desired a very materialistic situation. Then Krishna takes us. He fulfills our desires. So what we'll do now, you know what we'll do now? We will take a little break. How's that? For 5 minutes. Don't go away, okay? No sneaking away. And in 5 minutes, we will continue on with the next section, mantras 9 to 14. And we may not do the whole section, but at least some of it. So don't go too far away. We'll start in 5 minutes. Srila Prabhupada ki 9 to 14. I'm just looking now at the beginning of your overview books, an overview of the sections. So we say here, there are different types of non-devotee, and they achieve varying degrees of misfortune. In order to advance nicely A devotee must understand both the wonderful nature of spiritual life and the defects of material life, culminating in understanding Lord Krishna's position as the supreme absolute truth. Yes, so that's the basic idea. And in your overview books, we then go mantra by mantra. Mantra 9, let's look at mantra 9. So the basic idea here in the first paragraph of the description of mantra 9. Mantra 3 referred to different types of killers of the soul, or non-devotees, who do not understand the Ishavasya principle. In mantra 9, 2 types of these persons are described, well, in more detail. The materially ignorant and the materially knowledgeable. Let's read mantra 9. Andham tamaha pravishanti ye vidyamupasate tato bhuya ivate tamo ya uvidyayam rita. Those who engage in the culture of nescient activities shall enter into the darkest region of ignorance. Worse still are those engaged in the culture of so-called knowledge. Isn't that interesting? The basic idea is that, well, we explain in our notes here, in your overview books, Prabhupada explains that to be materially knowledgeable is more dangerous than to be ignorant. So Prabhupada says that on page 64, it's the second paragraph. As far as vidya is concerned, the first mantra is explained very clearly that the Supreme Lord is the proprietor of everything, and that forgetfulness of this fact is ignorance. The more a man forgets this fact of life, the more he's in darkness. In view of this, a godless civilization directed toward the so-called advancement of education is more dangerous than a civilization in which the masses of people are less, quote-unquote, educated. Yeah. You know, if people, at least in many, many cases, if people are very simple and they really don't have much material facility and they're just really not capable of getting material facilities somehow or other, then they cannot do so many bad things in so many expert ways. But, you know, if people have material intelligence, then they can figure out how to enjoy to the maximum. Exploit the material nature. How to, you know, have all different types of intoxicants. How to engage in illicit sex life in so many different ways. And to eat all different types of undesirable things, you know, prepared in very fancy ways, and just exploit and abuse the material nature and destroy the rainforests and, you know, global warming and all that. Only people who are really materially intelligent, quote unquote, could manage something like global warming. That's an achievement. That's an achievement. You know, simple people just living on the farm and just, you know, living from day to day. They could never get global warming together. No chance. So Prabhupada in the purport, where is it? I forget exactly where it is, but somewhere, Prabhupada makes the point that this type of education, which facilitates people becoming expert at abusing and exploiting material nature in other people, it is something like the jewel, a jewel which may be on the head of a serpent. Sometimes you get that, apparently. Some serpent, very dangerous, but it has a jewel on its head. And people may think, oh, look at this, very nice. But then they're lured to their deaths. Yeah, so it's like that. Even Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he wrote an essay about who was the demon that Krishna killed in Vrindavan, who was in the form of a calf? Vatsasura. Baby cow. So Vatsasura represents the anartha of, well, anarthas which affect children and anarthas which affect people who have to deal with children, like particularly parents. And, you know, it's a whole essay, it's got many points in it, but one point he makes there is that when people get very sick, then of course they want to be cured. Of course. But he makes the point that so many people, when they're healthy, they use their health just to increase their sense gratification and their sinful activity, and they can just race around and do so many things and drink this and eat that and chase after the opposite sex and, you know, like really active materialistic existence. And he makes the point that when a person is sick, if they're really sick, bedridden, they can't do that. They can only eat certain things and they can't move. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta makes very, you know, interesting and profound point. With people like that, it would be better if they stayed sick. It would be their good fortune if they could stay sick. Because when they get well, then off they go. The high life and all that. So better if they stay sick. In this sense, in the ultimate sense. So then Prabhupada in the purport goes on to talk about, let's see, page 65, the bottom part of the page. There are people called Vedavadarata and Mayaya Parita Jnana. Well, the Mayaya Parita Jnana, they're basically like the scientist types. But Prabhupada then goes on mainly to talk about the Vedavadarata people over on page 66 and 67. Anyway, it's a bit of a long story, but very briefly, Vedavadarata people, they're people who understand the Vedas, but they use the Vedas for getting material benefits. In that way, they just go deeper into material existence. Srila Baladev Vijayabhushan, in his commentary on the first verse of Vedanta Sutra, Atato Brahma Jigyasa, that now we should inquire into Brahman, into spiritual life. So he analyzes this little sutra in a very interesting way. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Ata means thereafter, after something. But now this verse is saying atato, which in terms of Sanskrit grammar, it's ata. It's being repeated. Thereafter, thereafter. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. So after two things, we should inquire into, or we can inquire into spiritual life. After two things. So first thing he says is just gross material life. Just no religion, just somehow or other get enjoyment, beg, borrow or steal, just get sense gratification. So he says this is the life of an animal. Purusha Pashu. Purusha means human being. Pashu means animal. Purusha Pashu means a man animal. Looks like a man, a human. But actually you look at the life, it's the life of an animal. So thereafter, first of all you've got to give up that. But now there's another stage, you've got to give up something else. After something else also. Then you can inquire into spiritual life. So what's the other thing? He says it is materialistic religiosity. That actually we want the same things. We want money, we want comforts, material facility and greater enjoyment and good health. But we want to get these things through some religious process, praying to God, give us this day our daily bread, as the Christians say, or as the Hindus say, give me a house and a car and a color TV, Om Jai Jagadisha Hare. So the materialistic people, the grossly materialistic people, they're just getting the same things through any means. Just work hard to get money, or just steal. Anyway. But now, these other people, the materialistic, religious people, they're getting the same things, just the same things, but through religion. So really, their lives, in certain ways, are like the lives of animals, because it's all about eating, sleeping, mating, health. It's all just revolving around the body. So the animal level, not the spiritual level. So he says these people are religious animals. Religious animals. They're interested just in the animalistic things, but through religion. So religious animal. And one has to go through that. Then you can inquire into Brahman. So these Vedavada Rata people being referred to here, they're like that. How to use the Vedas to get material things. And then right at the end, last paragraph, page 67 at the bottom, Prabhupada talks more about the Mayaya Parita Jnana. Some of them, and of course we said the scientists, they're like that. Mayaya Parita. Maya, of course, means Maya, illusion, and Parita means stolen. Aparita means stolen. So their gyan, their knowledge, is stolen by Maya. That's the scientists. But now here Prabhupada's applying it in terms of, he says here, the Maya Paritagyana class of men are self-made gods. Some of them even think that they are gods. Why worship the deity in the temple? Just worship me. Yeah, so like this. Let's go on to mantra 10. Anyad evahur vidyaya, anyad ahur avidyaya, iti shruma dhirana, yenastad vichachakshire. The wise have explained that one result is derived from the culture of knowledge, and that a different result is obtained from the culture of nescience. Well, you know, that sounds like a pretty obvious point, doesn't it? Sounds pretty obvious. It's not quite as obvious as it sounds. And Prabhupada explains in the purport. So the thing is, we're talking about not just knowledge, like we read a book A, B, C, and just collect information in our heads. Not that sort of knowledge, but the term is used, culture, culture of knowledge. Culture of knowledge. So Prabhupada explains right at the beginning of the purport, and he refers to Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13, verses 8 to 12, if you're familiar with those verses. There Krishna describes knowledge, or the process of knowledge. So Prabhupada then says one should culture knowledge in the following way. You know, not just go to CNA, buy the book and read the book, and that's the culture of knowledge. It's much deeper than that. The culture of knowledge, well, it's straight out of Bhagavad Gita, and Prabhupada lists out the points here. Number one, first part of cultivating knowledge. One should become a perfect gentleman and learn to give proper respect to others. Actually, in Bhagavad Gita, it's humility, amanitvam, humility. Yes, humility is the first part of knowledge, or the process, the culture. You know, you might think, no, humility, what's humility got to do with knowledge? Anyway, let's just carry on. And two is basically pride. One shouldn't pose oneself as a religiousness simply for name and fame. Number three, don't be a source of anxiety for others. Number four, be tolerant. Number five, be honest. Number six, take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. Number seven, follow regulative principles. Number eight, study the scriptures. Number nine, avoid illicit activities. Number 10, be sort of frugal, simple. Don't accept more than you need. 11, don't be in ignorance, thinking you're your body. 12, one should understand the dangers of birth, death, old age, and disease. Janma mrityu jara vyadi, dukkha dosh anudarshana. One should have a good darshan. Dukkha dosh anudarshana. One should have a good darshan of birth, death, old age, and disease, and dukkha dosh, and the concomitant miseries and faultiness of the whole process. So one should understand the weakness, the shortcomings of material life. Number 13, well, yeah, sort of live simply again. Number 14, don't be attached to your family. 15, don't be too happy or distressed if material, just on the basis of the material circumstances. 16, become a devotee, a pure devotee. 17, live in a suitable place. 18, one should study spiritual knowledge. So Prabhupada says, you can see there, immediately after this number 18, Prabhupada says, these 18 items combine to form a gradual process by which real knowledge can be developed. Except for these, all other methods are considered to be in the category of nescience, ignorance. So yeah, you might think, a person might think, well, you know, this is all very well. Most of these points, some of them are connected with knowledge as such, but most of them it's more like sort of personal character development type points. But just consider, the first one is amanatvam, humility. Humility. What has humility got to do with knowledge? And when we say knowledge here, of course, we mean knowledge of God, because that's the ultimate knowledge. What's humility got to do? You know, why can't you understand God if you're proud and arrogant and puffed up? Well, the thing is, when people become proud and arrogant and puffed up, like the Brahmin in the story of Narada and the cobbler and the Brahmin, then they can't understand God. In so many cases, they think that God is just some fiction or fairy tale. And who needs God? I can do things my way. Whereas with humility, then one is willing to offer one's obeisances at the lotus feet of the Lord and humbly accept instruction from spiritual authorities. But the puffed up materialists think, you know, spiritual authorities, who needs them? I'm the authority. So in this way you can see how humility helps with knowledge, actually, and how pride can be a great obstacle to knowledge, particularly knowledge in this sense, the ultimate sense. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, if you look page 71, just a little further down there towards the bottom, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, a great Acharya, maintained that all forms of material knowledge are merely external features of the illusory energy, and that by culturing them one becomes no better than an ass. Donkey. Yes. There's a song of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's, very nice song. Vidyara Vilase. Vidyara. Vidya means knowledge. Vilas means pastimes. My pastimes of knowledge. And the song is about his experiences at school and how he studied, and you know, he really went through school and worked hard, and at the end he got his diploma or degree or whatever, and he said, then I came out and I realized I was an ass because I didn't even know who I was. And indeed, not only did I not know who I was, I thought I was someone who I am not. So talk about being an ass. If you don't know who you are, you know, it's not a good platform to start your life from. Yeah, so Anyway, then Prabhupada goes on to emphasize how the materialistic universities, they're actually extremely destructive in terms of real knowledge. Knowledge of God and higher understanding of life. They give you some sort of mechanistic understanding or idea about life, and it's generally godless. And of course at the university, as you know, many young people go to university and they end up just partying and smoking daca and chasing the girls or the boys, or the girls and the boys. And it's all just sort of, it's a mess. It's just a terrible mess. And there's no emphasis at all, zero, on the real culture of knowledge or the development of spiritual character and progressing on the spiritual path. So Prabhupada's recommending, you see on page 72 right in the middle, university students today are not given instructions in the regulative principles of brahmacharya, celibate student life, nor do they have any faith in any scriptural injunctions. So in other words, that whole process of material education is considered, in terms of this verse, avidya. And as they said, the wise have explained that one result is derived from the culture of knowledge, and that a different result is obtained from the culture of nescience. And we will, this evening, close with mantra 11. Let us just read it. Vidyam cha yas, tadvedo bayam saha, avidyayam rityum teratva, vidyayam ritam ashnute. Only one who can learn the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. So the thing is, what does this mean? We have to understand both ignorance and transcendental knowledge if we're to really be successful in Krishna consciousness. What's the idea here? The idea is not that we all have to become PhDs in some material subjects, multi-PhDs. I know a couple of people like that. They got nothing better to do with their lives. And they got lots of money. So they just get one degree, and then they get another, and then they get another. I mean, there are such people, just for something to do. Oh, I think I'll do this now. And they end up with like a whole lot of degrees. So it doesn't mean, the verse says we have to learn the process of nescience. It means we have to understand the process of nescience. Not that we have to dive into it and just learn all the facts and figures and all the details about this material world and chemistry and biology and engineering and medicine and etc., etc., etc. And then we can say, no, we have learnt the process of nescience now. No, it means we have to understand the process. What is material life? In order to advance in Krishna consciousness, you need to understand, at least to a reasonable degree, what is material life? How does this material world work? Like in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna teaches the 3 modes of material nature. So we have to develop some idea, some understanding, how the modes of material nature work, how people become conditioned. These things we have to understand. And of course we have to cultivate knowledge, as we were reading in the previous verse and purport. We have to go through that culture of knowledge, including studying the philosophy, but also developing the character, humility, pridelessness, tolerance, and so on. So we have to do both things. If one simply tries to understand Krishna and does not understand that I'm not this body, I'm spirit, soul, I'm entangled in this material world, I have to follow regulative principles because of this, and in that way I can develop my consciousness of Krishna. If someone thinks that you don't need to do that, then generally you end up sort of like a sahajiya. It's all just Krishna, 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 but we remain materially attached because we don't understand we have to follow regulative principles, so therefore we don't follow the regulative principles. You don't follow the regulative principles. If you don't follow the regulative principles, you can't make much progress. You can make some progress, but you can't make much progress if you don't follow regulative principles. You have to get up early in the morning. Yes. If you don't get up early in the morning, if you just snooze in and become a sleeping specialist to make sure you get plenty of rest, then you end up in tamagun. If you sleep, you have to sleep a certain amount. Otherwise, if you don't sleep enough, you'll be in tamagun. And whenever you sit down, you'll fall asleep. But then if you sleep too much, more than what you need, you go back into tamagun. It's not that you just become more refreshed and more energetic because you got more sleep. No, you go back into tamagun and become dull and lethargic like that. So we have to adjust our lives even in terms of something like sleeping in order to progress in Krishna consciousness. You have to do it. Otherwise you won't make so much progress. So those people who neglect this aspect of Krishna consciousness, in many cases they end up like sahajiyas. They're classic sahajiyas. They imagine they're Radha and Krishna and they dance together. In Bengal there's a whole culture like that, sahajiya culture. But at least, if one doesn't have a balance between getting out, making some effort to get out of material life, plus, of course, making a good effort to come closer to Krishna, if you don't have a balance like that, then it's difficult to make progress. And this is why Prabhupada emphasized the 4 regulative principles. This is why Prabhupada preached so much, you're not this body, and preached so much what's wrong with material life, the pitfalls of material life. Prabhupada spent hours and hours